History is often forged in blood and betrayal. In the tumultuous landscape of the ancient Near East, where kingdoms rose and fell like the desert wind, one dynasty, the House of David, clung precariously to its throne in the small kingdom of Judah. But even in the heart of the sacred city of Jerusalem, no king was safe from the cruel twists of fate. Our story begins not with a coronation, but with a massacre. 6 years before he took the throne, the future King Joash, or Jehoash, was just an infant, the sole survivor of a bloodbath ordered by his own grandmother, the ruthless Queen Athaliah. She sought to wipe out the entire royal line of David. Hidden within the hallowed confines of the temple of the Lord by his aunt Jehosheba and her husband, the influential high priest Jehoiada, the young prince lived in secret. For 6 years, the true heir to Judah was a hidden boy, raised in the shadows of the altar. Finally, at the age of 7, Jehoiada struck. In a daring coup, the priest revealed the true king, crowned him, and executed the usurper Athaliah. The unlikely king Joash began his reign, a reign that started with piety and promise, but would end in disgrace and a violent death. King Joash inherited a kingdom riddled with corruption and neglect after Athaliah's pagan rule. Fortunately, the young king was guided by a wise and powerful mentor, the man who saved his life, the high priest Jehoiada. Jehoiada was the true power behind the throne in those early years. He essentially ran the kingdom. Joash, as the Bible tells us, did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all the days of Jehoiada the priest. This was Judah's golden age of religious zeal and reform. Joash's greatest early achievement was the restoration of the temple. For years it had been defiled and allowed to fall into disrepair. The king, now a young man, spearheaded a massive fundraising effort. The priests placed a chest with a hole in the lid, the first known instance of a public collection box by the altar. The funds poured in, and the money was given directly to the overseers, bypassing the traditional, often corrupt, priestly system. This act, practical, reforming, and deeply pious, cemented King Joash's popularity. He was seen as the savior of the temple, the righteous king who had restored the glory of David. But this era of harmony and faith was utterly dependent on one man's life. The partnership that defined Joash's reign came to an end around 836 BCE. Jehoiada, the high priest, protector, and mentor, finally died. He was buried with the kings, an honor seldom given to a priest, a testament to his unparalleled service. With the strong hand of Jehoiada removed, the true nature of King Joash began to emerge. He was no longer the pious boy king. He was a man susceptible to the counsel of his princes, nobles who favored a return to older, more relaxed religious customs, including the worship of foreign gods. Joash listened. He abandoned the strict monotheism of his early years. Judah returned to the worship of Asherah and Baal. Apostasy had infected the heart of the kingdom. Jehoiada's own son, the high priest Zechariah, stood up against the king's betrayal. He publicly rebuked Joash, "Because you have forsaken the Lord, he has forsaken you." King Joash's response was swift and brutal. Forgetting the debt he owed to Zechariah's father, Joash ordered the high priest killed. Zechariah was stoned to death in the very courtyard of the temple of the Lord. His last recorded words were an indictment and a curse. "May the Lord look upon it and avenge it." This act of sacrilege, the murder of a priest, the son of his Savior within the sacred walls, turned the hearts of the people against the king and sealed Joash's tragic fate. The internal strife of Judah was quickly compounded by external threat. To the north lay the powerful kingdom of Aram Damascus, led by the formidable king Hazael. Hazael was an expansionist. He had already crushed the northern kingdom of Israel, and now his gaze fell upon the wealthy, exposed southern kingdom of Judah. Around 796 BCE, the Aramean army marched south. This invasion was a crisis. Joash, now isolated politically and morally by the murder of Zechariah, was utterly unprepared. The sources suggest the Aramean army that came against Judah was relatively small, but Judah's morale was so low, and their God, it seemed, was against them. The Aramean forces swept through the Judean countryside, finally setting their sights on Jerusalem. The once mighty King Joash, who had championed the temple's restoration, now had to buy his city's survival. Joash stripped the sacred gold and consecrated items from the very temple he had rebuilt, sending them as a massive tribute to Hazael. This act of profound humiliation saved the city, but utterly destroyed the king's reputation. He had depleted the sacred treasury and shown himself to be militarily weak and politically incompetent. The king retreated, a shell of his former self, into Jerusalem. He was wounded in battle and, worse, broken in spirit. The betrayal, the religious apostasy, and the national humiliation had turned his loyal servants into deadly enemies. The final chapter of Joash's reign is one of pure conspiracy. With the king injured, unpopular, and discredited, two of his court officials decided to act. They were likely men whose families had suffered under his misrule, or who were simply disgusted by his impiety. The conspirators were Zabad, son of Shimeath, and Jehozabad, son of Shimrith. They were likely part of the royal guard, granting them close access to the ailing king. The setting for the assassination was a place of royal retreat, the house of Millo, a fortress or palace near Jerusalem, perhaps where the king was convalescing. There, in his bedchamber, around the year 796 BCE, King Joash was struck down by his own servants. He died not on the battlefield, but at the hands of those he trusted. The conspirators, in their minds, were executing divine judgment for the murder of the high priest Zechariah. The betrayal was complete. The boy king who had been saved from a massacre and crowned in a coup was murdered in his bed. The final insult to his reign. While his son Amaziah took the throne, Joash was not buried in the royal tombs of the kings of Judah. His body was laid to rest in the city of David, but separate from the anointed lineage, a final damning statement on his life and rule. The story of King Joash of Judah is a powerful cautionary tale about the corrosive nature of power and the vulnerability of faith. His life was defined by the influence of others, saved by Jehoiada, guided by Jehoiada, and ultimately corrupted by the very princes who convinced him to abandon that guidance. Joash's reign is a tragic symmetry. He started as the king of the temple and ended as the man who ransomed the temple's treasures. He was crowned by a high priest and murdered for executing a high priest. His fall reminds us that even the most promising beginnings can be undone by poor counsel and a fatal lapse of moral judgment. King Joash reigned for 4 decades. He was a survivor, a restorer, and ultimately a victim of the very violence and betrayal that had brought him to the throne. His assassination, a cold-blooded act of vengeance, closed the book on a king whose legacy remains forever etched in the shadow of the man he betrayed.
If you are enjoying the story, smash the like and subscribe button. It tells me you want more deep dive into famous royal historic and high-profile assassinations.